Howdy my totally as always Tubular gamers, we're back with, you guessed it, another video. Thanks for coming back to the channel. Sorry if I sound a little weird. I've been really sick lately, just very under the weather, but I'm powering through it because today I want to tell you about 2023's hidden gems. You know, there have been plenty of amazing, notable games of 2023, and I've talked about them a bunch. I'll be talking about them even more as I'm working on my top 40 games of 2023, but today I really want to focus on the games that didn't get a ton of attention. The games that might have been forgotten or pushed aside or ignored, or maybe it came out on the same day as another huge game and nobody even talks about it because of that. Those are the games we're focusing on today. Call them underrated, call them hidden gems, call them the corn that's in the poop. We're looking at the games that didn't get a ton of spotlight that I think deserve it. Games that I think are personally great, or maybe not enough people talked about it in my opinion. You know, you might have heard of a couple of these games. If you have, that's great, but by the end of this video, hopefully you've been introduced to a few new games you want to check out, and who knows, one of your favorites of the year could be right here in this video. And so let's just get right into it. This list is in no particular order. Let me know down below if you think I'm missing some games or what some of your favorite games of the year were. I'll just give a shout out to Pizza Tower. Still have not played it, but heard wonderful things about it. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. We got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. That money's going to Dayquil, I promise you. And so with that, let's get into it. Of these games, what's the first one I want to talk about today? Oh, it has to be Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. I've talked a few times about this game already, but I'll continue to talk the hell out of it because I love this game. It is one of my favorite games all year. You know, Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future, some of my favorite games of all time. I'm really excited to see what Sega does with the series after all these years, but I'd be really surprised if it's actually better than Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. This game just completely understood the assignment and really brought a Jet Set Radio style game into the modern era with a great aesthetic, a fantastic soundtrack, excellent controls, a cool trick system, an interesting story, varied locations. Like, I could go on and on. I did a 15-minute review on this game because I just loved it so much. Like, this game, it has it all. It has everything I've wanted from a Jet Set Radio game. I said it then, I'll say it now. I expected this game to be good. Maybe even as good as Jet Set Radio, but I did not expect this game to actually be better than Jet Set Radio. It is better than Jet Set, sure. It doesn't have all the lovable characters like Beat and Gum, and the soundtrack might not be better than Jet Set's. The jury's still out on that one. I've been listening to Jet Set for like 20 years, so give it another decade and then maybe I'll have an answer for you. But this game, when it comes to the gameplay, when it comes to the sense of style, it just kills it. It absolutely kills it. It's better than Jet Set's. The level design's great, the platforming's great, the trick system's better, the combat's better. I think the story's interesting, it's engaging. Sure, I will say the factions, the groups, the rivals are not as memorable as Jet Set's, but I still think they're pretty good, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with this game. The pacing's great, it doesn't go on too long, it ends before it gets old. Like, I have no doubt that I will be returning to this game for years to come like I did with Jet Set. I'm not going to play Jet Set anymore. I played enough of those games. I got Bomb Rush to play now. And so, hidden gem, underrated, whatever you want to call it, I'll always hype this game up. I haven't seen it, you know, plastered all over like other games, so I'll always say it's a hidden gem. You probably heard me talk enough about this game, so we'll just move on. And so for our next game, you probably haven't heard of it. It's Slayers X Terminal Aftermath, Vengeance of the Slayer. Now, before you go, what even in the hell did you just say to me? Hear me out for a second. Do you remember that game, Hypnospace Outlaw, the game where it was like the 90s web simulation and you were like a detective? Well, this game is actually a spin-off. It's a follow-up to Hypnospace Outlaw. It stars basically the best character from Hypnospace, which was Zane, the super edgy teenager from the 90s, and he got his own game. Like, the story of the game is that Zane made this game in the 90s and then it got lost, and 20-something years later it's been found and people can finally play it. I will say you don't need to play Hypnospace Outlaw to play this game or understand it. It's very easy to pick up and understand. Zane really is a stereotypical edgy teenager from the 90s, and the game absolutely reflects that. And so what we have is a very edgy, childish game that really is a throwback to 90s shooters. The game is a first-person boomer shooter, and it plays closest, I'd say, to Duke Nukem 3D. PC, or maybe Redneck Rampage, especially graphically. I'd say it's the closest to like Redneck Rampage. I love how this game looks. It has a great aesthetic. It looks super unique, and the music absolutely slaps. Like, the presentation through and through is just great. But when it comes to the gameplay, it's a really solid boomer shooter, you know? The game isn't the longest. It doesn't have the most expansive levels, but the gunplay is satisfying. They have some unique twists on pretty standard weapons. The enemies are pretty unique. This game, yeah, it was a really enjoyable time through and through. The game is on Game Pass. It's on PC and Xbox, and I know there were plenty of good boomer shooters that came out in 2023, but I didn't see like anybody talking about Slayer's X outside of Nitro Rad and Civi, and that's a shame because this game is pretty good. Sure, it's not the longest, it's not the most challenging or rewarding, but it's still an enjoyable, entertaining game. It's a great game to play through in a sitting or two where you just kind of turn your mind off and just blast everything and laugh at how goofy it is, and then a couple years later you do the same thing because you forgot all about it. If you're a fan of Hypnospace, this is an absolute must-play if you've not played it yet, and even if you've never heard of Hypnospace, I can still recommend this game. It's a solid shooter that is a good time. Another game that I didn't think got enough love was Horizon Chase 2. Now, the way I found out about this game was actually at GDC. I was like, wait, they're making another Horizon Chase Turbo? I love the first one. That's one of my favorite arcade racers ever, and yeah, it was there at GDC to play, and I tried it and was like, when is this coming, man? He was like, sometime later this year, and yeah, it did come out this year. It came to PC and Switch this year, and I have not seen enough people talking about this game. I didn't even see that many people talk about the first Horizon Chase. I'm seeing even less people talk about this one, and that's a real shame because this is maybe the best arcade racer of the year. This or another game I'll talk about shortly. So for the uninitiated, Horizon Chase 2 and its prequel really are retro throwbacks, graphically and in style. It's a throwback to older racing games such as Pole Position, but there are still some modern sensibilities in there. I think the first thing you'll notice is this game has a great aesthetic. It's colorful, it's pretty, and it just looks nice, and it has a really solid frame rate throughout. The music is also really great, and then the next thing you'll probably notice is this game's sense of speed. Horizon Chase 2 has an excellent sense of speed. The first game had a wonderful sense of speed. This game absolutely maintains that. You feel so fast in this game. You go really fast in this game, and the way everything's scrolling, like, oh, I love it. I love how this game looks and how fast you get to go, and the feel is really great. The controls are smooth as butter. Like, once I started playing this game, I really couldn't put it down. I played this pretty much non-stop for a day or two because I was just having so much fun with it. Like, you go so fast, and then the races themselves have some challenges. You're always racing a pretty decent amount of people. There's these coins to collect. There's actually, you know, completion here. You're leveling up your cars. You're making them faster. There's some rewarding elements. There's pretty decent progression, and the flow and pacing of this game was actually really solid. The game isn't stupid long either. It ends before it gets old, and it was a short but sweet time. That's all I'll say. This game absolutely stands out to me as a hidden gem, as despite being published by a publishing giant Epic Games, I feel like I didn't see anything on this game, and I love the first Horizon. I just didn't see like anything, and I haven't heard anybody talk about it, and so I'm here to spread the word. This is a great racing game and a really fun time. Our next game is another game you might have never heard of, and that is Corn Kid 64. I was introduced to this game from another YouTuber, Petronius, and he did a really solid review on it, and I was like, yeah, I'll check this game out. I love the 64 platformers, and this game, yeah, it's no joke. It really is a new 64-bit 3D platformer. I've played a couple of these throwback platformers, and they didn't really do much for me, but this game actually hit with me, and I can recommend it. If you're someone who has a ton of fond memories of Banjo-Kazooie, Mario 64, or maybe some of the more obscure 3D platformers from the 90s, I think you're going to enjoy what this game has to offer. It's not the biggest game, it's not the longest game. Like many other games on this list, it is pretty short, but it's a fulfilling, rewarding experience. It has a pretty absurd premise that may have something to do with Stephen King's Thriller, or probably not. I think it's just a game about a bunch of one-horned goat babies. Really, it's about our main goat baby trying to escape this dream he has every single night. And when it comes to the gameplay, it really is a throwback. You know, it's a 3D collectathon. You're dropped into these pretty large environments and told to just go collect things. You have a really unique moveset, and the game actually really takes advantage of this moveset. There's a bunch of different platforming mechanics thrown in here. Collecting stuff is fun. There's some different objectives. The environments are nice. The music is actually pretty good. In fact, I'll give a big shout out to the music. It's good. I believe it was only done by like the creator of the game, and so I'm just like, wow, this is actually a good throwback to the 64 OSTs, and then it's good in its own right. The music it slaps, and I really like the presentation, and I just like the vibe this game gives off. It really actually does give off the vibe that it is a 64 game. It totally gives off that vibe with its camera also being just as terrible as it was in Nintendo 64 games. I don't think the camera is very good, but the movement's good, the controls are solid, I like the premise, I like how unique the aesthetic is, and I feel like we just don't get any games that look anything like this anymore. And then I saw pretty much next to nothing about this game in any of my circles. Maybe I'm in the wrong circles, but I wish I saw this game sooner because it's actually one of my favorite indie games of the year. I know that might be a little crazy to say, but I actually genuinely enjoyed my time with this one, and I wanted to keep coming back just to try to find all the secrets and do everything. Sure, it's not crazy long, you could probably beat this game in a few hours, but if you want to collect everything, you're going to be here a while. Right now, the game is only on Steam, which is a real shame. It really should come to Switch, but it can run on basically any computer, and it's dirt cheap, so if you like platformers, just go check it out. Now, this next game I actually recently just talked about, so I'll keep things short, but it's Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince, and so I know what you're thinking. You're like, really? A Dragon Quest game is on Hidden Gems? Dragon Quest is one of the most recognizable RPG series of all time. Well, I haven't seen jack about this game. Do you know about this game? Do you know what this game's about? Most people don't seem to, and that's a shame, because this really is one of my favorite RPGs of the year, and it's one of my favorite Dragon Quest games of the last couple of years outside of 11. This is actually a really solid game. It's a fun throwback to the older Dragon Quest monsters, but actually puts it in the modern day, and it's as close to a mainline Dragon Quest game as it gets. It takes place in Dragon Quest IV's world and has you playing as the main antagonist of Dragon Quest IV. He's been cursed, and so he can't hurt monsters, and so he's a monster tamer and has the monsters do the fighting for him, and it's up to him to take his revenge on those who cursed him and damned him and yada yada yada. The story is pretty whatever, but what makes this game is the monster collecting. The monster collecting is actually really great. There's hundreds of different Dragon Quest monsters to get, and it's really fun to get them. You'll go through some really interesting environments collecting monsters, having them do battle for you, and sure, presentation wise, this game ain't very good. It doesn't look really above a PS2 game, and the frame rate kind of sucks, but the gameplay, it really makes up for it, as it is a fun time. It becomes a bit addicting trying to get as many of these monsters as you can. You'll forget what the main plot even is because you're just trying to get all these monsters, and I just had a ton of fun getting the monsters, having them do battle for me. Fusing monsters to get new ones is really good. The battles are pretty solid. I mean, it's typical Dragon Quest combat for the most part. I enjoy the whole season switching that happens every like 10 minutes in real time. I think that's cool. It's a real shame that Square Enix just did not market this game at all. They didn't push this game at all. All the focus was clearly on like FF16, maybe Star Ocean, nothing for this game. That's a shame, because if you like Dragon Quest, if you like RPGs or traditional RPGs, this actually is like a must play. It's a great game that should not be ignored. And our next game is My Friendly Neighborhood, one of the most unique games I've played all year and one of my favorite horror games of the entire year. It's actually a very traditional survival horror game that sees our man, an electrician, going to this old Muppets-like studio to shut down their signal after it magically came to life. It turns out all the Muppets are alive, and yeah, they're just kind of trying to attack you. You'll have to contend with a bunch of things, whether it's the Muppets themselves attacking you, ammunition, puzzles, getting through this giant building, etc. And this is one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had all year, especially when it comes to indie games. I was introduced to this game at Day of the Devs last year in San Francisco, and the developers showed this game off to me, and I was like, wait, is it just FNAF with Muppets? No. It is absolutely not that. It is not that. It is much more of a serious survival horror game where you really do have to manage your resources. You even have to manage the box like it's Resident Evil 4. And the puzzles aren't messing around here either. They can get a little tricky. And then the game has plenty of scares. The Muppets scared the crap out of me plenty of times. I'm not afraid to admit it. But this game was also really rewarding. It was rewarding to progress through. The flow is nice. The pacing is great. And I was really intrigued with what was going to happen next. There's multiple endings. It's very replayable. You can make the game super challenging. This game also has a really great vibe and a particularly great atmosphere. Like, the atmosphere is really solid in this game. I love the save rooms. It reminds me of RE7. The music reminds me of it, and in the best ways, and that's really incredible considering how few people worked on this game. Like, they totally get the atmosphere here and are able to create something a little tense. I'm sure there are plenty of people who will look at this game and just laugh it off as another goofy FNAF or Poppy playtime, but this game honestly is better than those. It's a real survival horror game, and If you like horror games and haven't tried this game, I really recommend that you do. It's currently only on PC, but it should be coming to console sooner than later, and I hope it does because it's actually pretty great and it's got a really great message behind it as well. And our next game is a strange one. It is the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. I know what you're thinking. You're probably like, this guy's talking about Dragon Quest. He's talking about Sonic on a hidden gems list. Does he even know what hidden gems are? He's not just thinking of the like Chaos Emeralds or something. No, I'm serious when I say this game is actually a hidden gem. Under any normal circumstance, I would not say a Sonic game could be a hidden gem, but this game is a little different. It was released as an April Fool's joke. It had a bunch of notoriety for like 48 hours and then pretty much just vanished into the ether. It was only released on Steam, and it's a point-and-click Sonic game, not a platformer. There are some platforming sections in there, but it really is a point-and-click game. And so with all of this, yes, I think the game is a hidden gem. It's also free to download, so yeah, there's really no reason to not try it unless you absolutely hate Sonic. And what even is this game? It's called The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. Well, as the title implies, Sonic has been killed, and you need to figure out who killed him in a whodunit situation. And all I gotta say is this game might only be like 2.5 hours long, but man, it was enjoyable, especially as a longtime Sonic fan. It was really fun to try to figure out who killed Sonic and what was going on. And then the game actually is a pretty solid presentation. It is some really pretty art. I love how this game looks. The music's pretty good, and then there's a ton of throwbacks and fan service to other Sonic games. Like, there's actually a ton of throwbacks to older Sonic games. It's really cool. Like, if you're a longtime fan of Sonic like I am, you'll be smiling ear to ear if you haven't played this yet. Like, there is so many references and jokes and nudges towards other Sonic games. Like, just the fact that Shadow says it's just a joke, well, I am the ultimate life form, really tells you everything you need to know. There is a few mini games thrown in here, some platforming, but it's pretty minor. It's not really intrusive, and it adds a bit of variety. It changes things up a bit, and I really didn't mind it. This game also has really great writing. It's one of the funniest Sonic games ever made. It's just one of the best Sonic spin-offs ever. Seriously, it actually is. I'd rather play this game than Sonic Superstars. I think this is better than the mainline Sonic game that came out this year. Get your pitchforks out, call me crazy, whatever you want. I enjoyed this game, and I think you will too, and that's why I'm talking about it here. And our next game you probably forgot even came out this year, and that is SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake. This game actually came out in January and was one of the first releases of 2023. I feel like it came out, got a little bit of buzz, and then pretty much just vanished. And that's unfortunate because this game, it was way better than it had any right to be. I expected a half-decent platformer, but what we have here truly is one of the best SpongeBob games ever made. Now, I love the SpongeBob movie game, but I really love SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. It's one of my favorite games from my childhood and just one of my favorite platformers of all time. This game really is a continuation of those games. It really is a new 3D platformer that stars SpongeBob going through a bunch of wacky time zones trying to save all of his friends, and I actually really enjoyed it. You know, like I've mentioned, I love 3D platformers, and this game feels like a fun throwback to 3D platformers of the early 2000s. It's not overly complex, there's not a ton going on here. Some people could even say the gameplay is a bit shallow, but I enjoyed the gameplay. I had some fun here. The level design's pretty decent. SpongeBob has an interesting moveset. There's a little bit of replayability here. There's a bunch to collect. There's a ton to see, and then there's just plenty of SpongeBob references. This game absolutely gets it. It just has SpongeBob references up the wazoo. There's tons upon tons of references, especially old SpongeBob as well. Like, I was just laughing my ass off with some of these jokes, and it really just brought a tear to my eye because I love SpongeBob. It's like my favorite TV show ever. I grew up with the first couple seasons, and I still think they're hilarious now, and this game just totally has that vibe. It totally has those jokes, and that makes me happy. Maybe I'm just overly nostalgic, or I'm just falling for this bait, but hey, I guess the bait worked. I really like it. I like the gameplay. I think it's fun. Sure, it's not the most enthralling, enticing, or exciting, and you don't have the craziest moveset on the planet, and the levels aren't going to totally wow you and blow you away, and the set pieces aren't amazing, and the game doesn't have AAA production quality, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. The game's pretty much dirt cheap nowadays, and I think if you have any interest in SpongeBob, or really have any interest in 3D platformers, just go check it out. It's pretty cheap. And so here we have RoboCop Rogue City. This is probably the most well-known game of this entire list. It's one of the more recent games as well, and I kind of went back and forth whether or not I should include this game on the list because it does seem to be decently well-known, but in the end I decided to because this is a RoboCop game coming out in 2023, and it's actually really good. Like, you'll see in my top 40 games of the year, but this game actually ranks pretty high on that list, and I really did not expect that. I was worried this game was just going to be a total pile of crap and not any good, but after playing through it, I was actually kind of blown away with how much fun I had with this game. This is like the best FPS I've played all year, and I don't even love RoboCop. Like, that first movie's pretty great, but after that, I'm pretty whatever about RoboCop, but this game, it really just kind of blew me away. Like, this has some of the greatest gunplay I've ever seen in a shooter. Like, it is stupidly satisfying, it is violent, it is gory, there's a bunch of different weapons. Like, it is just immensely satisfying. I could not get over just how much fun the gunplay was. The game isn't stupid easy either. There's a bunch of different enemy types. You get put in a bunch of interesting scenarios. I think the game actually has some pretty solid level design. The game looks really good. It runs on Unreal Engine 5. I think it actually looks pretty astounding if you remember that this is basically a AA game. It's very small in terms of budget, development costs, etc. I think it looks great in that sense. I love how there's actually open areas to explore. There's side missions. The side missions are actually rewarding. You get to make choices that will influence the rest of the game, and you can even get different endings. There's skill points. I did not expect any of this. I thought it was going to be a pretty straightforward, mediocre to half decent shooter, but what we have really is so much more, and I have no problem recommending it to fans of RoboCop or first-person shooters. Do not think this is just some licensed garbage that'll end up in the bargain bin for like $5, kind of like SpongeBob actually. This game, it's got a lot more going for it than you would actually think, and that's why I've included it on this list, because it just really actually exceeded my expectations by so much, and it's one of the best games of the entire year, and I did not think I would be saying anything close to that, even just a few months ago, so I have nothing else to say other than go check it out. Now, our next game I've talked a few times about, and that is Amnesia The Bunker. Now, I know Amnesia, especially these days, is not the most underground niche horror series. It's not even the most niche horror game I'm talking about in this video, but The Bunker really is, in my opinion, the best of the entire Amnesia series, and one of the scariest games I've ever played. Like, seriously, this game is just crazy tense and had me wanting to shit my pants for the 5 or so hours it took me to beat it. I thoroughly enjoyed this game. Now, while I did see plenty of people talk about this game, especially horror enthusiasts, and it is on the Game Pass, I still feel like not enough people talked about this game, especially when talking about the best horror games of the year. I feel like this game has kind of been outshined by Alan Wake 2 and RE4, and in my opinion, this game's way scarier than both of those. Taking place during World War I, you're trapped in this bunker with this monster that's trying to kill you, and you're really trying to manage your resources to try to get the hell out of this bunker. Like, the atmosphere is depressing, it is tense, it is a very serious game that is ready to just make you lose your shit. And then it's that full-on survival horror experience. You know, the first Amnesia, there really wasn't much survival horror to it. You couldn't fight back. There weren't any resources to really manage outside of the lantern. Here, there's way more to manage. You do actually have a gun, but you really can't fight back with it. You'll solve plenty of puzzles. You'll really explore this bunker to the fullest, and you're just trying to stay alive while this monster hunts you down. And yeah, there's some really tense moments here. I got the crap scared out of me plenty of times. Like, just hearing the monster walk around is scary in itself. It's like they took the Alien Isolation monster and put it on crack and in a shorter game. And because of that, I think it's even scarier. The pacing's great. It really is just kind of relentless from the first like 5 minutes all the way up until the very end of the game. It's very relentless. It does not let up, and it's constantly toying with you. It's totally not for the faint of heart, but man, it is good. I have no doubt that in the future, we'll look back on this game and go, that was a scary game, that was a good horror game, that was a really good one. I feel like it was just kind of buried under all of these big AAA horror games, again, like the RE4 remake, the Dead Space remake, Alan Wake 2, and while this game doesn't have the biggest budget, the greatest story, or the largest scope, or some of the best combat you'll ever find in a game, it still has a really unique, tense atmosphere that cannot be matched and should not be missed. And for our last game today, we have another licensed game. I know, surprise, surprise, but seriously, here we have Hot Wheels Unleashed 2. Now, the first Hot Wheels Unleashed, I would also say is a hidden gem. I didn't really expect much from it, and it is, in my opinion, the best Hot Wheels racing game of them all. It was way better than it had any right to be, and so when they announced a sequel, and so soon after the first Unleashed, I was still pretty excited for it. This game, it really is just more of Unleashed. They added a few mechanics here and there, but if you you liked Unleashed, you're gonna like this game. And then they decided that it was gonna come out the same week as Spider-Man 2 and Mario Wonder, and yeah, no wonder I didn't hear like anyone talking about this game. And that's a shame, because this is pretty much my favorite racing game of the entire year. I mean, the new Forza was pretty good, but Hot Wheels Unleashed 2, this game was not messing around. Like, they brought out the big guns. This is a really satisfying, fun arcade racer. Sure, it's not the most challenging unless you ramp the difficulty up. The track design isn't going to wow you, and if you played the first Hot Wheels Unleashed, it might feel a little bit like deja vu, but I still really enjoyed the game. I love how the game looks. I love how they actually really capture that feeling of a kid playing with toys. I love the setting. I think the music's pretty good, but then when it comes to the actual racing, it is nothing to scoff at. This is a really solid arcade racer. The controls are actually pretty good. Drifting feels nice. There's boosting that's cool. There's jumping, which is new, and I think the jumping's fine. There's tons of different vehicles to choose from. You'll go through an entire campaign mode that's a solid 8 to 10 hours. There's online multiplayer. The microtransactions are not as ridiculous as they were in the first game with the loot boxes. I don't love how they are in this game, but it's better than the loot boxes, I'll give it that. The racing is definitely the best aspect of this game. It also has a really good sense of speed. You do get to go really fast in this game, and that's fun. It does have some flaws, don't get me wrong. The story I'd rather not talk about. Again, the microtransactions, the progression can be a little weird, and upgrading the cars can be a little clunky, but I still had an absolute blast playing through this. It's not the longest game. It doesn't have a ton of replayability. I'm sure there's a ton of DLC here, and they're going to add more, like the first Unleashed where they added Looney Tunes and all this other stuff, and I'm sure give it 2-3 years there will be an Unleashed 3. I really doubt there is not going to be an Unleashed 3, but I'll be there. I'll totally be there, because Unleashed 2, it's a pretty great game and I really enjoyed it. And that's really where we're going to wrap things up. I enjoyed all of these games. While some are clearly better than others, I think these are all good games that are worth your time for a variety of reasons, and I hope you enjoyed my little video here. I'm sorry again that I sounded a bit weird or might not sound super interested in things, but I swear it really is that I'm just mad sick. And so for today's code word, if you made it to this part of the video, comment Dayquil. I don't know why I just said that, but we're sticking to it. Dayquil is the code word. That means you made it to this part of the video. You made it to the end. Really appreciate you. I'm gonna give you a big old kiss. Actually, you know what? Don't take that kiss because I'm really sick, but you know what I mean. I'm just rambling at this point. Thank you so much if you made it to this part of the video. I really appreciate all the support. Y'all are doing great. See you next year. Bye-bye now. Yeah, bye.